Hello and welcome to DCN Weekly, your regular roundup of Australia's shipping, ports and logistics news. I'm Lindsay Reid, publisher at DCN, and I am joined by Caroline Tung, journalist. Hi, Caroline. Welcome.
Hello, Lindsay. Great to be back again.
Lovely to have you. And we'll kick off talking about some of the stories that have been making news on DCN this week. So we've had lots of people moving this week, and the first one that's been grabbing everyone's attention is David Fethers, of course, from Boluda. So David was at Smith Lamnalco for a good 10 years before moving into the position of CEO and managing director when Smith was sold to Boluda. That was 6 months ago, and now, Caroline, he is on the move.
Yes, that's right, Lindsay. So Fethers has flown the coop. Yeah. So David Fethers has departed his position as managing director of Boluda in Australia and PNG. The circumstances of his departure had not been disclosed to the industry, but the APAC CEO, Walter Newworld, had issued an official statement to announce the departure.
Yes, and Dale put a bit of a bio of David's history, and it was news to me, learned that David actually used to be a commercial airline pilot before moving into maritime.
Yeah, that's right. So he was a pilot at Cathay Pacific for more than 2 years, and before that he previously flew for Virgin Australia.
Yeah, it's a very rich career. Well, we'll watch closely to see where David moves on to, but this afternoon this morning, we published an update on that as Boluda has now announced David's replacement. And it's someone quite well known to the Australian industry, Caroline.
Yes, so Ivan Spanic has been appointed the new managing director of Boluda for Australia and PNG. And of course, he was previously based in Sydney as the chief operating officer of Fethers.
Yes, and most recently, of course, Ivan's been working over in Saudi Arabia at the port of Neom, which is a really interesting project. But yeah, it will be great to have him back on Australian shores, and we'll bring you more when we find out when that role will start. So moving on, another story this week was a nice tale about Queenscliff and a slightly unusual visitor, Caroline.
Yeah, that's right. So we had the tall ship, the Alma Doepel, visiting the Queenscliff Maritime Festival a couple of weeks ago, which is, of course, being restored by our good friend Peter Van Dyne.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful vessel. We've got some lovely footage of that actually on the website. If you hop on and have a look at that article, you can see, I think there's footage of the Alma Doepel entering the harbour there.
Yeah, it's absolutely spectacular 360 footage there. Very beautiful ship, and we look forward to just seeing when it's fully restored.
Yeah, so when the ship is restored, it has quite an interesting future ahead of it, playing a role in training for youth development.
Yeah, that's right. So it will be used as a vessel for the training and education of the new generation of seafarers. And the reason it was at the festival is just to sort of draw attention to its history and the actual restoration itself.
Yeah. Thanks, Caroline. So we've had more financial results in the news this week, and today released DP World's half-yearly financial results with a bit of a focus on Australia there. Caroline, can you tell us more?
Yeah, that's right. So they reported the US and Australia together at 14,130,000 20-foot equivalent units. So this is up from 13,015,000 TEU from the previous year. And just in total, so DP World posted a total record revenue of 24.4 billion, 22% increase from the previous comparable period.
Okay, thanks, Caroline. Well, moving on to something a bit different, there's been a dispute brewing for a little while now between Carnival Australia and the MUA. So that came to a little bit of a head earlier this week, Caroline. Can you tell us a bit more about what was going on there?
Yes, so the dispute was actually over inspection rights following what we understand to be an incident on Monday at Circular Quay in Sydney. So it wasn't the MUA themselves, it's WorkSafe New South Wales officers that were doing the inspection. And then they tried to get on board the Carnival cruise line. The MUA representative said they were refused entry to the vessel, and basically they put that down as refusing to comply with Australian workplace safety law.
Okay, thanks, Caroline. Another story that's been making headlines this week is TT Line, Spirit of Tasmania story. They always incur lots of interest when we publish stories about the Spirit on DCN. But this week, TT Line is relocating the Spirit 4. Is that right, Caroline?
Yeah, that's right, Lindsay. So the Spirit of Tasmania 4 has found a temporary home at the former Williamstown dockyard in Melbourne. And of course, it was relocated from its previous berth in Corio Bay in Geelong.
And Spirit 4's sister ship, Spirit of Tasmania 5, is currently en route from Scotland. So are we assuming that that vessel will end up on the southern side of Nelson Pier? Is that right?
Yeah, that's right, Lindsay. So we are still waiting to hear back from TT Line about this one. Yeah, so stay tuned and we will bring you an update.
Well, at the risk of not mentioning the war, that's obviously been across headlines, not just on DCN, but globally this week. And one of the key issues here is, of course, fuel and supply and pricing. Now, this is something that is an ongoing topic. And Caroline, you have written broadly about increase in fuel costs in terms of SMEs and agriculture.
Yes, so the regional cities, New South Wales, their chair, Steve Krig, has warned of just the impact on productivity because of higher oil prices and freight bottlenecks. Rising fuel costs, obviously, been an issue just across the board in general. And he was warning that productivity will go backwards if this keeps happening. And he's just calling on the government to, try to take some action on what we can control on the part of the state and federal governments to basically back small-scale infrastructure projects that will have a lasting impact on economic growth. We have also heard from the National Farmers Federation, Hamish McIntyre, and he said the fuel demand has increased as the winter cropping season draws closer and closer. We're seeing signs of a tightening supply and rising costs for key inputs. And he was telling us this just in the context of the recent round table by the Energy Minister, Chris Bowen. And as a result of this, the farmers have been hit really hard. Their incomes, their agricultural production, the availability of food, all of these have been affected by rising fuel costs. And of course, also felt by small businesses in the major cities. And the Victorian Automotive Chamber of Commerce as well, Peter Jones, came out and said, look, the small businesses, they're sort of dealing with a double whammy here. They're not, they're caught in between sort of absorbing the rising wholesale fuel costs and at the same time also trying to, or at least manage the frustration of their customers who obviously don't want to bear the cost of this either. And of course, on the topic of fuel, about 600,000 barrels of petrol, diesel and avgas from Texas is on its way to Australia. And ExxonMobil has been tasked with chartering 2 tankers to ship that to Australia.
Yeah, well, the effects are being felt far and wide, and we'll obviously keep on top of any updates as a result of things like fuel prices. Fertilizer is another one that's being pretty strongly affected by this conflict in terms of the supply chain. Okay, well, thanks for that, Caroline. That pretty much wraps up our most read this week. But of course, there are lots more stories at thedcn.com.au. And make sure you are, if you're not already, subscribed to receive the daily newswire into your inbox at 8 a.m. each morning.
And if you'd like to get in touch with DCN, we'd love to hear your thoughts, tips, or tip-offs. Drop us a line at editorial@thedcn.com.au.
Absolutely. We would love to hear from you. Well, thank you, Caroline. And thanks to everyone for listening. We will catch you again next week.